It appears the war of words between Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi isn't over yet. There are more charges coming against Julian Assange, and Theresa May gives a tearful resignation.
So, Team Rising is here to break it all down. Joe McLean is a Democratic strategist. He's joined by James Hitchcock, an editorial assistant for the New York Times opinion section. Welcome to you both.
Good morning, gents. Welcome to the Bro Show.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bro Show today.
Gotta fix that next time.
I'll talk to the team. But,
exactly.
Well, first let's start off. So we've got the President of the United States. He's feuding with the Speaker of the House. Day 2, Day 3, Day 90 of what's happening here. But essentially, the President came out and he's been tweeting that he told the camera he was a very stable genius, I believe, but he's also been tweeting against Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi has been saying that she hopes that there is an intervention on the President's behalf and with his family. Joe, do you think that this is a smart move for the Democrats? Do you think that it is a good thing to escalate this kind of theater-style politics? And I understand the President may excel at that, but all of it seems to get away from the seriousness and towards an impeachment drive.
I think it actually eliminates a lot of the impetus toward impeachment. Look, Nancy Pelosi has taken up permanent residence, rent-free, in Donald Trump's head. She's playing him like a cheap fiddle, and it is so much fun to watch. And the beautiful thing is that she will never rise to his provocation. She treats him like a 3-year-old who stamps his foot and holds his breath till he turns red.
But you don't think
it's beautiful to watch.
Let's take a listen, actually, to the President and to the Speaker yesterday before we get more into this.
But if you look and you take a look back, you'll see all of the things that you're talking about and all of the things that you're asking about. I was against at that time, and I'm still against. I haven't changed very much. Been very consistent. I'm an extremely stable genius.
And now this time, another temper tantrum. Again, I pray for the President of the United States. I wish that his family or his administration or his staff would have an intervention for the good of the country.
James, do you think that escalatory rhetoric on both sides, I mean, does that do us any good? Because it seems to me that Nancy Pelosi's message to the caucus has been policy, let's focus on the investigations, not impeachment. If anything, does this make impeachment more likely for the Democratic caucus?
I don't think necessarily. I think you bracket it aside in a sense. I think this is, I mean, I agree with Joe in that this was a very calculated move on her part to basically put aside this sort of internal debate among the Dems and among a caucus that is seemingly in revolt on the issue against her. I mean, this is there's not a clearer example of sort of creating a common enemy for all the coalition. Right. Yeah.
So the Democratic caucus here seems like they are on a train that is headed toward impeachment. More and more people seem to be getting on this train every day. The question is, for me, Joe, is can Pelosi stay in front of it?
I think she already is, and I think two things happened this week that were really useful. Two federal courts ruled against the Trump administration, and they didn't just rule against them; they slapped them. And that matters because it proves to the caucus that Pelosi's strategy is working, and it may take a little longer to play out, but it's working, and it's going about it the right way. And then she provoked him into this temper tantrum, which also shows that her strategy is working. And remember, guys, there are two separate tracks here. There are two separate campaigns going on here. It's not really a campaign; it's not the right word. But there's the track that's internal in Washington and in the Democratic caucus, and then there's the broader track that's the nation as a whole and the issue of governance, right? And in order to keep her people in line, she's provoked him and kind of made fun of him and shown that she can win, and that matters because her caucus, particularly the liberal wing of the caucus, wants to win.
But what do the Democrats do when they call people before committees? Those people refuse to come. They vote against them and kind of wag their fingers. What is the thing that the Democrats can do that actually forces Trump to pay a price for sticking his middle finger up against the Congress and saying, I'm not going to participate?
The courts have to do their job. For democracy to function,
no, but
all of the branches of government have to function. Because right now, the executive branch of the government is essentially giving the rest of the government the finger.
Well, that's not necessarily the case, because, James, the way I've seen this is that if they give them the documents, they're going to impeach him. And if they don't give them the documents, they're going to impeach him for not giving over the documents. It seems that the energy in the Democratic base is just so one-side tracked on impeachment that impeachment itself is the goal rather than to actually investigate. What do you think that speaks to within the energy of the Democratic base for the want for impeachment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it first of all, obviously, an immense antipathy towards Trump as a personalized figure. You know,
Right.
and this is distinct from general animus toward a part against the other partisan side. I mean, I think Pelosi is a very able leader in terms of recognizing, though, that what might drive the base, might motivate the base, will not necessarily have the same effect in more purple areas of the country. A lot of areas of the country that really allowed the Democrats to soar to victory in 2018.
Right.
Yeah.
But at some point, will the Democrats have a choice, right? If the president keeps saying no and keeps undermining congressional oversight of the administration, either your choice is to wuss out and accept the no, which meant the president changes the game, or you got to ratchet up in some way to make the president pay a price here.
Right. I mean, procedurally, it seems like we're coming to a head. I think the thing is that with a little episode like this one with this tiff between Pelosi and Trump, it buys Pelosi time. It creates another news cycle that is distinct. It creates one that is sort of ecumenical for Dems, regardless of how the individuals feel about impeachment. But I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of
What we'll know things have
Yeah.
really gotten out of control? And we're going to move on to new topics. When things have really gotten out of control, when they start erecting jail cells in the basement of the
Right.
house.
Yeah.
And they go pick Hope Hicks up from her home with the Sergeant of Arms and put her in one because she refuses to appear.
Well, we should another very contentious issue. So Julian Assange was indicted yesterday, 18 charges by the United States Department of Justice, filed in the Eastern District of New York. He was charged most significantly for the First Amendment purposes with under the Espionage Act for releasing classified information. Now, press freedom critics have said, Joe, that this could endanger the First Amendment as a whole and make it so that the government would have the option and the choice to indict any reporter who were to release leaked classified information.
Yeah, this is a really dangerous precedent. Look, nobody likes Julian Assange. Nobody that I know, anyway. I mean, we all think he's a creep.
Truly hated by everyone.
Roundly hated by everybody. But the fact is that what he did is no different than what any of you guys would do as journalists. And actually even encouraging someone to leak classified information is no different than what happened in Watergate with the Washington Post. And I mean, this is really dangerous. Now, if you facilitate the theft of classified information, that's a crime.
That was the first charge, right?
That's a crime.
If you're a journalist. Yeah,
That's the question.
So my question is,
did he help? Did he actually not just ask for it, not just accept it, but did he help give him tools in order to execute?
And that's a completely different thing, but that's not what these indictments are, and that's very dangerous.
And it's so critical not to conflate these two things as well. One, the charge is assisting Chelsea Manning with, basically breaking a password, and realizing that charge is very different from the Espionage Act charges that are being, the indictment. I think it's critical. It's so important not to blur those lines, and you end up snowballing into a much more dangerous area in terms of freezing First Amendment, free speech.
One of the interesting things we were talking about before this show was about if the Supreme Court were to get involved. What are the implications for that, James? Which is, as you were saying earlier, it could possibly blow up the entire Espionage Act if the Supreme Court were to rule against the government here.
Yeah, no, I mean the history of the act over the last 100+ years, I think, has really been one of delicate balance in terms of not pushing. I don't think the federal government has wanted to really confront this fully in like Supreme Court context. Right. So it's interesting to see such an aggressive sort of move on the administration's part, just because it's something that past presidents and administrations have really worked to be careful about.
Probably rightfully so, though.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think this is a very dangerous precedent. Yeah. And I can't figure out what game they're playing at, because career lawyers in the Justice Department have got to know better. They have to be afraid of this too. So why are they doing this? Who's telling them to do this?
It's possible they think they might win.
Is this William Barr? Is this?
I mean, winning shouldn't be the objective, right? The objective here is to
Should be
figure out how do
justice.
we
I mean,
have
we can all understand.
It's justice.
Like, we
it's
can
also the
understand
fact
the
whether or not
contempt,
we have a free and open press that is monitoring the government and is willing to say things about the government that are not popular, which is in the foundational documents of our democracy. I think we are in real constitutional tests and pulls here, and I think we just have to be focused on the bigger issues.
Which is why I raise it, because if you believe, if you're the president of the United States and you believe that the free press in the United States is the enemy of the people, then you're going to seek to regulate what they print and what we say. And to me, that's just fatal for a democracy.
Well,
We
we'll
should be
see if
really
Assange
careful
even
about
makes
that.
it over to this coast before we can get even into that. So we have,
fatal.
speaking of coasts, right? We have some breaking news this morning. Prime Minister Theresa May actually announced her resignation. I believe we have some video of that.
But it is now clear to me that it is in the best interests of the country for a new Prime Minister to lead that effort. So I am today announcing that I will resign as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
Wow. A Brit on the verge of tears. I mean, she has been in a ship that has been buffeted about by some pretty intense waves throughout her entire premiership. And the question comes now, what is a country like Great Britain to do when the entire world economy, in many ways, is looking at what happens in Brexit and how they navigate it, because Britain is such an integral part of the global financial sphere?
No doubt. If somebody had the exact answer to that, what is the direction? I suspect the results of the upcoming election for conservative leadership would be a lot clearer than they are right now. Yeah, I mean it is.
Will we end up? You think will we end up with a Brexiteer as the head of the
That's
party?
the question.
It's
The caucus is almost evenly split on it.
It is. I think it seems likely if we depending on how confident you are in Boris Johnson's ability to navigate the upcoming elections. I mean, the EU parliamentary elections are never determinative. They're never necessarily correlative with how British politics will move. But I mean, we're expecting on Sunday to see a pretty strong show of
It's almost 34% of the country,
right?
as I understand, for the Brexit party. So there is a lot of anger that this is not happening.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of unsettled. I mean, it's an unsettled debate, and which is on both parties, both Labour and among the Tories. It's a tricky issue.
Well, I think it's interesting, Joe, because it does point to just a general dissatisfaction within, and within Western society of these multilateral institutions, and it's leading to a real questioning about who we are, what's our relationship with the world. I mean, with the Europeans and this 34% of the country, they truly feel like their future and their economic vitality was just manufactured and thrown out the door to Europe.
Yeah, and it's not just global institutions; it's institutions in general. I mean, there has been an erosion, and there's been a lot of scholarly work on this, a lot of academic work on this. But since the mid-'60s, there's been a constant erosion in Western society of the confidence in all of our institutions, whether it's church, state. Nobody goes to the Rotary Club anymore.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's just there. And now you see this rise of right-wing nationalism and interferes with populism. It reminds me of the Know Nothing Party in the United States back in the 19th century, right? I mean, and those things, our civilization is based on a global system of trade and economics and cooperation and banking, and if that begins to break down, which could happen, civilization is fairly fragile. And if the City of London, which is a financial center of the Western world, one of them, if the City of London is damaged by the fight over Brexit and the European Union, and it causes the world financial system to go into a crisis, which it could, then we got a real problem. Because if the banking system doesn't work, if the financial system doesn't work, then manufacturing doesn't work, trade doesn't work, nothing works. and we freeze to death
So
in the dark.
here's the question for the table, which is who now is the leader of the global free enterprise democratic society movement and the planet, right? Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He doesn't believe in NATO that much.
Nope.
He doesn't believe in the U.S. being involved in a lot of international agreements. He pulled out of TPP. He's undermining, he undermined Paris, all these other agreements. Angela Merkel is leaving in Germany. Macron is under stress in France. We're seeing May, who's now leaving the premiership in Great Britain. The question becomes, who is it that steps up and sort of holds the international coalition, transatlantic coalition together?
I think that's the point, though, is that the people have lost, right? They've lost faith in those institutions, James. And what's coming is that we're creating a new order in which we have to figure out how these interlocking parts of which the last 70 years of prosperity have been built, but how do we reform that to the frustrations of the classes?
Yeah, and I think that's where it's you have to be careful to recognize there's a lot of ground between an EU-type customs union, freedom of movement across borders, and becoming a totally isolationist garrison state.
Right.
I'm sure that's sort of what the presidential administration would say, at least, that there is middle ground there.
But this gets to Joe's point, though. I'm going to interrupt you here because this gets to Joe's point, is that it's incredibly fragile. Yeah. And so once you start pulling at these strings on the edges of all these institutions, it's the reason we've had peace in Europe for the last 70 years is because we've had this international order that has tied all these countries together in this mutual, this sort of mutuality that they're all invested in each other. And so now we've got this, and we're not doing this in a vacuum. We've got China, who's outside trying to assert their influence. We've got Russia that's poking at everybody and trying to undermine all these things. And the question becomes at some point, is there an international movement to stop what is an international phenomena of us pulling ourselves apart from each other?
There is not that I know of, and there should be. It's in our national interest to lead the Western alliance, and we aren't doing it. We have abrogated. President Trump has abrogated the leadership, and it's dangerous.
This is why we need the Republicans in the Senate to step up. It's not just because I know I gave
exactly right.
I know I gave Senator Cotton a little bit of a hard time when he was here, but it's not just because of a partisanship kind of question. The question is, what are the institutions that we're going to think are going to hold in a democracy, and whether or not the House, the Senate, and the President are going to all work together to hold those institutions together. And what it seems like right now is we've got a president who's not that interested in institutions. He's just really not. And we've got a Senate that's only interested in protecting and putting Donald Trump first. And so we've got to sort of figure out at some point the Senate needs to step up and say, here are the guardrails, here are the lines. We support you, but we're not going to go beyond these lines.
Well, we'll solve the Western Alliance another time. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for being here. Next on Rising, musician Andy Grammer believes that the power of music is the ability to amplify good causes.
A belief he practiced recently at the Global Down Syndrome Gala here in Washington. I had a chance to talk about his message of lifting people up when Rising continues.